And let's bring in ABC contributor, former FBI agent Richard Frankel for more on that. Richard, what does it mean that this attack is being investigated as an act of domestic terrorism? How does that change the nature of the investigation?
Well, when you investigate something as a act of terrorism, whether domestic or international, it gives you certain authorities potentially that you don't have under the criminal system. So you're able to use some of what's under the FISA, some other additional resources that the FBI has that they normally keep reserved for criminal. I'm sorry, for foreign actors or for acts of terrorism that you don't have in the normal criminal cases. And so that's why the FBI does it. And again, the FBI is going to investigate it as an act of domestic terrorism until they decide it is not an act of domestic terrorism or that it is. In other words, they're going to keep going with this until they fully vetted it out. And if in the end it's found not to be an act of domestic terrorism, something that can't be charged that way, they're still investigating it as a hate crime or as a violent crime. And so that doesn't mean that there may not be federal charges. It just may not be terrorism charges. It may be something more in the normal criminal realm that we've always dealt with. And again, it could be a hate crime.
So what would investigators need to show to determine this was domestic terror or this was a hate crime?
It goes to the motive. It goes to intent. When you talk about terrorism, you have to. The intent is to cause change, social or financial change through an act of terror. That's a very basic definition of it, but that's what you have to show. And so what they're going to do now is exactly as Pierre said. They're going to be going back through all the videos, through all the data that they get from the apartments. They're going to be talking to friends, family, going through social media, and they're going to look for the motive. And again, they're going to be looking at this as an act of domestic terrorism in that case. And they're also going to be looking to see if anyone in any capacity did assist the shooter in his act. And that is looking at how the guns were purchased. Did anyone, drive him anywhere? Did anyone, provide assistance in planning? So it's not just an investigation into the shooter himself. It's an investigation into the entire act, both leading up to the shooting and the shooting then.
Richard, police also now say the shooter may have attended the school, and an online post from the church indicates the shooter's mother worked there. How do those ties factor into that larger question of motive and whether this was domestic terror, or whether this was a hate crime?
Well, it goes to why that church in particular was picked and why it was attacked in the way it was. Also, it goes to his pre-planning, the shooter's planning. If you remember, there was that handwritten, map of the school. It shows that the shooter was able to come up to a set location where the shooter knew that if the shooter fired through those windows, she could cause damage and kill as many people as possible. There's also some belief that a door may have been blocked, which could have caused more damage, more injury to the people in the church. So this was all that pre-planning that was known because the shooter did know the school, did know the church, and was also aware of when the mass was and where and who would be at the mass at that time.
All right, Richard Frankel, we appreciate the analysis. Thank you.